I never thought my marriage would end this way, on our 10th anniversary no less. The day I had spent weeks planning, reservations at Mia's, her favourite Italian restaurant in downtown Manhattan, the diamond earrings hidden in my pocket, the weekend getaway to the Hamptons I'd arranged as a surprise. All of it, meaningless now. "You're fat. You're no longer the woman I married," David said, his voice cold as he pushed away his barely touched lasagna. The restaurant's warm lighting that had seemed so romantic moments ago now felt like a spotlight, exposing my humiliation for all to see. I sat frozen, fork suspended midway to my mouth, the bite of tiramisu suddenly tasting like ash. "I want a divorce," he continued, checking his Rolex as if my response was an inconvenience delaying his next appointment. "Jessica will be handling the paperwork. I've already moved most of my things to her place." Jessica. His 24-year-old assistant, of course. "I don't understand," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "David, we've been together for 12 years. If this is about... I can lose the weight. I've been stressed with the promotion, but I can..." "It's not just the weight, Melissa," he cut me off, his blue eyes, the same ones that had once looked at me with such love, now scrutinizing me like I was a disappointing investment. "You've changed. You're always working. You're not fun anymore. Jessica understands me. She makes me feel alive." 30 pounds. That's what I'd gained in the past year while working 70-hour weeks to secure my promotion to senior marketing director. 30 pounds while I helped support his mother's medical bills when he'd started his own law firm, and cash was tight. 30 pounds while I postponed having children because he said we weren't ready yet. "I've already spoken to my mother," he added, taking a sip of his $200 Cabernet that I'd ordered specially for our anniversary. "She agrees it's for the best. She's always worried about your family history of diabetes. You know, not good genetics for grandchildren." Margaret, his mother, the woman who had been dropping little comments about my appearance for years. "Oh, that dress is so brave of you, Melissa. Have you tried that new keto diet everyone's talking about? David was always attracted to athletic girls in college." "Your mother?" I repeated numbly. Of course Margaret would be involved. She'd never thought I was good enough for her precious son, the star Columbia law graduate with the bright future. "We can keep this civil," David said, reaching for his wallet. "I'm prepared to be generous in the settlement, provided you don't make things difficult. The firm is finally taking off and I can't afford bad publicity. His firm, the one I'd helped him build with my marketing expertise, for free, on weekends and evenings when I should have been resting." "How long?" I asked, suddenly needing to know. "How long have you and Jessica been... Does it matter?" He sighed, laying down his credit card without even looking at the bill. "Look, I didn't want to do this today, but my mother thought it would be better to get it over with before the holidays. Clean break and all that." His mother thought. "Of course." I looked at my husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, really looked at him. His perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit, the new haircut that was slightly too young for his 38 years, the designer stubble he'd started sporting 6 months ago, the subtle cologne that wasn't the one I'd bought him for Christmas. All the signs had been there. I'd just been too busy working, too busy trying to be the perfect wife, too busy supporting his dreams to notice my marriage crumbling. The waiter appeared, hovering uncertainly. "Is everything all right with your meal?" David flashed his courtroom smile. "Everything's fine. We're finished here." In more ways than one, I thought. The following weeks passed in a blur of paperwork. Tears and cardboard boxes. David had generously allowed me to keep our Upper West Side apartment, the one we'd bought together 5 years ago when his career was just taking off. Generous, he called it. The apartment was in my name because his credit had been shot from law school debt. Another detail he seemed to have forgotten. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, touching furniture we'd picked out together, photographs I couldn't bear to look at but couldn't bring myself to take down. My phone buzzed. My sister, Kate. "How are you holding up?" she asked when I answered. "I'm fine," I lied, staring at the half-empty closet where David's designer suits used to hang. "Bullshit," Kate replied. "I'm coming over, and I'm bringing wine. The good stuff, Not that pretentious crap David always insisted on. Kate arrived 45 minutes later, armed with 2 bottles of Pinot Noir and a takeout bag from our favourite Thai place in Brooklyn. "You look like hell," she announced, kicking off her shoes and heading straight for the kitchen to find wine glasses. "Thanks," I said, attempting a smile that felt more like a grimace. "It's my new post-divorce look, very chic in Milan this season." Kate poured generous glasses and handed one to me. "Have you heard from the asshole?" I took a long sip before answering. "His lawyer has. Apparently the generous settlement offer includes me waiving any claim to his law firm." "The firm you helped him build?" Kate's voice rose indignantly. "The one you created the entire marketing strategy for? The one you designed the website for? That firm?" I nodded, sinking onto the couch. "That's the one." "And what does your lawyer say?" I stared into my wine glass. "I haven't exactly hired one yet." Kate nearly choked on her drink. "Melissa Elizabeth Carter, it's been 3 weeks. Tell me you're not just rolling over and taking whatever scraps that Mama's boy and his dragon lady mother decide to throw you." "I've been busy," I defended weakly. "The Wilton account is in crisis mode, and I've been pulling double shifts to distract myself." "No," Kate said firmly, pulling out her phone. "Not acceptable. My friend Rachel from college is a divorce attorney, absolutely ruthless. Makes grown men cry during depositions. I'm texting her right now." "Kate, I don't want a big legal battle. I just want this to be over so I can move on." My sister fixed me with the same determined stare she'd used since we were children. "Mel, listen to me. You supported that man for 12 years. You put your career second so he could chase his ambitions. You postponed having the children you wanted because he wasn't ready. You dealt with his nightmare of a mother. And now he wants to throw you away because you gained some weight while working yourself to death? Oh, hell no." She was right. I knew she was right. But the thought of fighting David was exhausting. He was a lawyer, for God's sake. His entire career was built on winning arguments. "What's the point?" I asked quietly. "He doesn't want me anymore. Fighting will just drag out the pain." Kate set down her glass and took my hands in hers. "The point isn't getting him back, Mel. The point is getting what you deserve. The point is not letting that entitled jerk and his manipulative mother walk all over you. The point is standing up for yourself." My phone buzzed again. A text from David. "Need to stop by tomorrow to pick up my golf clubs and the rest of my watches. Will come at 2. Mother wants her silver serving platter back too, the one she gave us for the wedding. Make sure it's cleaned properly." Something snapped inside me. The silver platter Margaret had given us, that she reminded me at every holiday dinner was a family heirloom worth more than my car. The one I'd polished religiously before every dinner party, while she inspected it with a critical eye. I showed Kate the text. "Oh, that's rich," she seethed. "His mother wants her precious silver back. I say we use it to serve the papers Rachel's going to prepare." For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than numbness and despair. A tiny spark of anger, of indignation, of self-respect. "You know what?" I said, straightening my shoulders. "Call your friend. It's time I stopped being a doormat." Kate's face broke into a wide grin as she dialed. "That's my sister. Margaret Sullivan is about to learn she messed with the wrong daughter-in-law." Rachel Bennett's office was nothing like I expected. Instead of the intimidating, sterile environment I'd imagined, her workspace was warm, filled with plants and modern art. The woman herself was equally surprising. Early 40s, curly hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing a simple black dress rather than the severe suit I'd anticipated. "So," she said after I'd spent 30 minutes detailing my marriage and divorce situation, "your husband blindsided you with divorce on your anniversary because you gained weight. He's already shacking up with his much younger assistant, and his mother, who never approved of you, is orchestrating things from the background." Put so bluntly, it sounded like a bad Lifetime movie. "Yes," I confirmed, embarrassment heating my cheeks. "And I know how it sounds. Poor, naive wife gets dumped." "Stop." Rachel held up a hand. "First rule, we don't diminish your experience or your pain. What's happening to you is real, and it's unjust. Second rule, we focus on facts and strategy, not emotions, at least not in this room. Save the tears for therapy, which, by the way, I strongly recommend during any divorce." I nodded, oddly comforted by her no-nonsense approach. "Now," she continued, "tell me about your contributions to his law firm." For the next hour, I detailed everything: the unpaid marketing work, the networking events I'd organised, the clients I'd helped secure through my own business connections, the website I'd designed and maintained, the social media strategy I'd implemented. Rachel took copious notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, a small, predatory smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Melissa, has anyone ever told you about the concept of sweat equity?" I shook my head. "It's the non-monetary contribution that people make toward a business: hours of labour, specialised skills, intellectual input. It has value, often significant value, that can be quantified. By my estimate, you've put hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of sweat equity into Sullivan Law." My eyes widened. I never thought of it that way. I was just helping my husband. "And that's exactly what David and his shark of a lawyer are counting on," Rachel said, her voice hardening. "They're expecting you to think like a wife. Not like a business partner, but legally that's exactly what you were." She pulled out a legal pad. "Now, I need details about his mother's involvement in your marriage. From what you've told me, she's more than just an overbearing mother-in-law." I spent another 30 minutes recounting Margaret's constant interference. The loans that were never repaid, the family vacation home we'd helped renovate, that was suddenly off-limits when we wanted to use it, the trust fund she'd promised David access to once he was settled with a proper family. A milestone that somehow kept shifting. "And the kicker," I concluded, "is that I paid for her knee replacement surgery 2 years ago when her insurance wouldn't cover the specific procedure she wanted. $60,000 from my personal savings. David promised he'd pay me back when the firm started turning a profit, but—" Rachel's eyebrows shot up. "Do you have documentation of that payment?" "Of course. I have the hospital bills, the transfer from my account, everything." "And was there ever any written agreement about repayment?" I thought for a moment. "There were emails between David and me discussing it. He specifically said he would repay me when the firm became profitable, which it did last year." Rachel's smile grew wider. "Melissa, I don't think you realise what a strong position you're actually in. Your husband and his mother have made some serious tactical errors." For the first time since that awful night at Mia's, I felt a glimmer of hope. "So what do we do?" I asked. Rachel closed her notebook with a decisive snap. "We gather evidence, we build our case, and then we go on the offensive. David thinks he's being generous by letting you keep the apartment that's already in your name. That's not generosity, that's the bare minimum. We're going to make sure you get every penny you deserve, including a substantial stake in Sullivan Law." "Is that really possible? He's a lawyer, his mother has connections, You're just the woman who helped build his success while he was planning his exit strategy," Rachel interrupted firmly. "And I'm just the lawyer who's going to make him regret underestimating you." As I left her office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks: determination. David and Margaret Sullivan thought I would quietly accept whatever terms they dictated. They thought I was weak, dispensable. They were about to learn how wrong they were. David arrived at exactly 2 p.m. the next day, using his key without knocking, another small power play. I was waiting in the living room, Margaret's precious silver platter displayed prominently on the coffee table, polished to a mirror shine. "Melissa." He nodded curtly as he entered, Jessica trailing behind him like an eager puppy. She was everything I wasn't: petite, blonde, perky, and at least a decade younger. She had the decency to look uncomfortable. "David," I replied evenly. "Jessica." "We won't be long," David said, heading toward the guest room where he'd stored his golf equipment. "Just need to grab a few things." "Of course," I said pleasantly. "Take your time." Jessica hovered awkwardly in the entryway, her eyes darting around the apartment she'd probably heard so much about. "You can sit down," I offered, gesturing to the couch. "Oh, thanks," she mumbled, perching on the edge of the sofa like she might catch something. Her gaze fell on the silver platter. "That's beautiful." "Isn't it?" I agreed. A family heirloom, apparently, worth more than my car, or so I've been told repeatedly. Jessica shifted uncomfortably. Good. David returned carrying his golf bag, face flushed with exertion. I'll need to make another trip for the watches and some books. No rush, I said. I cleared my schedule this afternoon. Oh, and your mother's platter is ready. I gestured to the coffee table. Right. He set down the golf bag and reached for the platter, examining it closely for any imperfections. Finding none, he nodded with satisfaction. I'll take this down first. After he left, Jessica and I sat in awkward silence until she blurted out, I'm sorry it worked out this way. I studied her young face, the carefully applied makeup, the nervous fidgeting with her designer handbag that was definitely above an assistant's pay grade. Are you? She looked away. It's complicated. It always is, I agreed. Just remember, Jessica, what happens to the woman he cheats with eventually happens to the woman he cheats with. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. Before she could respond, David returned. The watches? He prompted, not picking up on the tension in the room. I pointed to the master bedroom. In the safe. You remember the combination. He disappeared down the hallway, leaving Jessica and me in another uncomfortable silence. He told me you two grew apart, she finally said, as if needing to justify herself. That the marriage was already over in all but name. I could have told her the truth, that I'd had no idea my marriage was in trouble, that David had never once mentioned being unhappy until that night at Mia's. I could have warned her about Margaret, about the impossible standards, about how no woman would ever be good enough for the Sullivan men. Instead, I simply said, I'm sure he believes that. David returned with a velvet roll containing his watch collection, most of which I'd gifted him over the years. That should do it for today, he announced. I'll come back for the books and remaining clothes next week. Actually, I said, reaching for an envelope on the side table, before you go, this is for you. What's this? He asked, frowning as he took the envelope. Just some paperwork. I've retained counsel for the divorce proceedings. That's her contact information. All further communication should go through her. His expression darkened. You hired a lawyer. Melissa, I told you I'm being more than fair with the settlement offer. There's no need to waste money on legal fees. I disagree, I said calmly, and so does my attorney. His jaw tightened. Who did you hire? Rachel Bennett. The colour drained from his face. Rachel's reputation in legal circles was evidently as formidable as Kate had claimed. This is a mistake, he said, his voice dropping to the stern tone he used when trying to intimidate opposing counsel. Rachel Bennett is known for turning amicable divorces into war zones. Is that what you want? Because I promise you, Melissa, you won't like where this leads. I met his gaze steadily. I already don't like where this has led, David. You made that decision for both of us. Now I'm making my own. He glared at me, then at the envelope in his hand. My mother was right about you all along. Beneath that sweet exterior, you're just after what you can get. The irony of his statement might have made me laugh if it wasn't so infuriating. Please give Margaret my best, I said instead, and let her know I'll be expecting repayment of the $60,000 I paid for her knee surgery, with interest. His face contorted with rage. You wouldn't. I would and I am. It's all in the paperwork, along with my claim to Sullivan Law, based on my substantial contributions over the past 5 years. You have no claim to my firm, he sputtered. My attorney disagrees, I replied serenely. As will the court, once they see the documentation of all the unpaid work I contributed. David looked like he might explode. Jessica tugged at his arm. David, maybe we should go. Your blood pressure... He shook her off. This isn't over, Melissa. You're right about that, I agreed. It's just beginning. After they left, I sank onto the couch, my hands trembling with delayed adrenaline. I'd stood my ground. For the first time since David had uttered those cruel words at Mia's, I felt a sense of power returning. My phone buzzed with a text from Kate. How did it go? I typed back, I did it. Gave him Rachel's info, told him I'm claiming part of the firm. He nearly had a stroke. Her response came immediately. Yes! So proud of you. Wine tonight to celebrate. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Absolutely. And Kate, thank you for not letting me roll over and take it. That's what sisters are for. Besides, watching Margaret Sullivan get her comeuppance is going to be the highlight of my year. Can't wait to see her face when she has to write you a cheque for that knee surgery. Neither could I. The game had changed, and for once I was the one making the rules. I expected immediate backlash from David after our confrontation, but days passed with no response from him or his lawyer. According to Rachel, this was a classic tactic, silence designed to make me anxious, to wonder if I'd overplayed my hand. They're hoping you'll get nervous and reach out, she explained during our follow-up meeting. Don't take the bait, let them sweat. I focused on work, throwing myself into the Wilton campaign with renewed energy. My boss, Janine, noticed the change. Whatever's going on with you, keep it up, she commented after I presented a particularly innovative strategy to the client. This is the best work you've done all year. If only she knew that my creative renaissance was fueled by divorce-driven determination. A week after I'd served David the paperwork, Margaret Sullivan made her move. Not through lawyers, but in her typical underhanded fashion, she called my mother. Mum and I had never been particularly close. She lived in Connecticut with her second husband, and we spoke maybe once a month. So when she called out of the blue on a Tuesday evening, I knew something was up. Melissa, she began without preamble, I just had the most disturbing conversation with Margaret Sullivan. I closed my eyes, counting to 10. Let me guess. She told you I'm being unreasonable about the divorce settlement. She said you're trying to take half of David's law firm, after he's been so generous letting you keep the apartment. She's very concerned about you, dear. Says you're not thinking clearly because of the emotional trauma. Of course she'd frame it that way. Margaret, the concerned former mother-in-law, just looking out for poor, unstable Melissa. Mum, with all due respect, this is between David and me, and our lawyers. Lawyers! She exclaimed. That's exactly what Margaret was worried about. She says you've hired some shark who's known for bleeding men dry in divorces. Is that the kind of reputation you want? Think about David's family, his standing in the community. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing bitterly. His standing in the community? Mum, he left me for his 24-year-old assistant after telling me I was too fat for him, on our anniversary. Well, yes, and that was very wrong of him, she conceded, though without much conviction. But two wrongs don't make a right, Melissa. Margaret is willing to mediate. She suggested you all meet for lunch, you, David and her, to work things out amicably, like family. The audacity was breathtaking. We're not family anymore. Mum, David made that choice, and I'm not meeting with them without my lawyer present. So stubborn. My mother sighed. Just like your father. This is why I always worried about you, Melissa. You never know when to compromise. After we hung up, I immediately called Rachel to warn her about Margaret's end-run attempt. Classic, Rachel said, sounding almost impressed. She's trying to isolate you, make you feel like the unreasonable one. Next, she'll probably start calling mutual friends, spinning the narrative that you've gone money-hungry and vindictive. What should I do? Nothing, Rachel advised. Don't engage. Don't defend, don't explain. Let her play these games while we build our case. The more desperate these tactics, the more it shows they're worried. She was right, as usual. Within days, I started getting concerned texts from friends. Are you okay? Heard things are getting ugly with the divorce. David seems really upset. Margaret mentioned you're struggling emotionally. I crafted a simple, dignified response. I appreciate your concern. This is a difficult time, but I'm taking care of myself and letting the legal process work as it should. I'd rather not discuss details right now. Most friends respected this boundary. A few pressed for gossip. The true friends revealed themselves quickly. Exactly 2 weeks after I'd given David the envelope, Rachel called with news. We've received a response from David's attorney, she said, a note of satisfaction in her voice. They want to schedule a meeting to discuss settlement terms. That's good. Right? I asked cautiously. It's very good. They wouldn't be coming to the table this quickly if they weren't concerned about our claims. I've reviewed their initial proposal. It's still inadequate, but it's a start. What are they offering? They're willing to discuss a financial settlement regarding your contributions to the firm, though they're still rejecting the notion of you having an ownership stake, and they've acknowledged the loan for Margaret's surgery, though they're characterising it as a family gift rather than a loan. I snorted. A $60,000 gift? That's convenient. Indeed. But the fact that they're acknowledging it at all means we have them worried. I've scheduled a meeting for next Monday. I'll be there, of course, but you should attend as well. It's important they see you're serious and involved. After we hung up, I wandered to the window of my apartment, looking out at the New York skyline. For the first time, I allowed myself to really think about what winning this battle would mean. Not just financially, but emotionally. What would it feel like to make David and Margaret face the consequences of their actions? To be seen not as the discarded wife, but as a woman demanding her due. It would feel like justice. And maybe, just maybe, it would feel like healing. The conference room at Rachel's law firm was designed to intimidate, all sleek surfaces, floor-to-ceiling windows, and imposing artwork. I sat beside Rachel, wearing my most professional black pantsuit, hair pulled back in a severe bun, makeup flawless. Armour for battle. Across the table, David sat with his attorney, Howard Greenberg, a silver-haired man with a permanent scowl, and beside them, to my surprise and Rachel's visible annoyance, Margaret Sullivan herself, dressed in Chanel and pearls, her expression one of practised concern. Mrs. Sullivan, Rachel said coolly, I wasn't aware you would be joining us today. This meeting is to discuss divorce settlement terms between my client and Mr. Sullivan. Margaret's thin lips curved into what she probably thought was a gracious smile. I'm here as moral support for my son, Ms. Bennett, and as a concerned party, given that some of the claims involve me personally. Rachel's eyes narrowed slightly. I see. Well, as long as everyone understands that negotiations happen between the legal representatives, not family members. Greenberg cleared his throat. Let's get started, shall we? We've reviewed your counter-proposal, Ms. Bennett, and frankly, we find the demands excessive and unrealistic. Rachel smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. What specifically do you find unrealistic, Mr. Greenberg? The claim for sweat equity in a firm my client helped build? The repayment of a documented loan? Or the division of marital assets accumulated during a 12-year marriage? All of it, David interjected, earning a warning glance from his lawyer. Melissa did some basic marketing work for my firm, work that any entry-level employee could have done. That hardly constitutes building the firm. I felt a surge of anger, but kept my expression neutral, as Rachel had coached me. Basic marketing work, Rachel repeated, opening a folder. Let's review what that basic work entailed, shall we? Development of the entire brand identity, creation and maintenance of the website, implementation of a digital marketing strategy that, according to your own firm's records, generated 43% of new client inquiries in the first year, organisation of networking events that secured connections with 3 major corporate clients. Would you like me to continue? David shifted uncomfortably. Those were wifely contributions. Melissa was happy to help. She never once mentioned payment or ownership. Because she was your wife, Rachel countered. Supporting your dreams as partners do, just as you theoretically supported hers. The law recognises the value of such contributions, especially when they directly impact the growth and profitability of a business. Greenberg raised a hand. We're prepared to offer a one-time payment of $50,000 to acknowledge Mrs. Sullivan's marketing assistance. That's more than generous for part-time informal work. Rachel actually laughed. Mr. Greenberg, that wouldn't cover 3 months of professional marketing services at market rate, let alone 5 years of comprehensive brand management and client acquisition. We're seeking $350,000, which is actually conservative given the documented impact on the firm's growth. Margaret made a choking sound. This is extortion. Mother, David murmured, trying to calm her. Rachel turned her attention to Margaret. Speaking of financial matters, Mrs. Sullivan, let's discuss the $60,000 my client paid for your knee surgery. With interest at the standard rate, that comes to approximately $68,400. Margaret's face flushed. That was a gift between family members. There was never any expectation of repayment. I could no longer remain silent. That's not true, Margaret. David and I explicitly discussed it as a loan. I have the emails where he promised repayment once the firm became profitable. Emails can be misconstrued, she dismissed with a wave of her manicured hand. David was simply being polite. You know how he is, always trying to spare people's feelings. Rachel slid a document across the table. These emails seem quite clear. Mum's surgery is a major expense right now while the firm is still growing, but I promise we'll pay you back once we're turning a profit. That's a direct quote from your son. Mrs. Sullivan, not much room for misconstruction. David and Greenberg exchanged glances. Additionally, Rachel continued, we have documentation showing the firm has indeed been profitable for the past 14 months, so by Mr. Sullivan's own timeline, repayment is well overdue. The meeting continued for another hour, with proposals and counter-proposals flying across the table. Rachel was masterful, never raising her voice, never showing frustration, but systematically dismantling each of their arguments with documented evidence and legal precedent. As we were preparing to leave, having agreed to continue negotiations, Margaret touched my arm. Melissa, dear, she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. Couldn't we discuss this privately, woman to woman? This legal wrangling is so distasteful. I looked at her hand on my arm, then into her eyes. No, Margaret, we couldn't. I trusted family once. I won't make that mistake again. Her expression hardened. You're making a grave error. The Sullivans have connections throughout this city. David's reputation is about to take a hit, I finished for her, unless, of course, he decides to be truly generous in the settlement. As Rachel and I walked to the elevator, I felt both drained and exhilarated. You did well in there, she said approvingly. Especially with Margaret. That woman is a piece of work. She's been manipulating situations for years, I replied. I just never stood up to her before. Well, you're standing up now, Rachel said as the elevator doors closed, and based on their faces when we left, I'd say they're finally realizing exactly what that means. 3 days after the meeting, I received an unexpected text from Jessica. Can we meet? Alone. It's important. My first instinct was to refuse, but curiosity won out. I suggested a coffee shop in a neighbourhood far from David's office or our apartment. Jessica was already there when I arrived, fidgeting with a napkin, looking nervous. She'd dressed down in jeans and a simple sweater, a far cry from the designer clothes she'd worn at my apartment. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't, I admitted. What's this about, Jessica? She took a deep breath. I'm leaving David. I gave notice at the firm yesterday. This was the last thing I'd expected. Why are you telling me this? Because... She hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. Because you deserve to know the truth. About everything. I stared at the small device. What is this? Emails, text messages, financial records. She pushed it across the table. David has been planning this divorce for over a year, working with his mother to protect assets, moving money around, even... She looked away. Even coaching me on how to pursue you. My stomach lurched. What? Jessica's eyes filled with tears. It wasn't an accident that I became his assistant. Margaret recommended me. I'm her friend's daughter. The plan was for me to work closely with David, for him to be seen spending time with a younger woman, creating a narrative that could be used in the divorce. I felt physically ill. Are you saying your relationship with David was engineered? By Margaret? She nodded miserably. At first it was just supposed to be for show, but then things changed. We actually did become involved, and I thought... She laughed bitterly. I thought I was special, that he really loved me. What changed? I asked, still trying to process this bombshell. Last week, I overheard him and Margaret talking after your settlement meeting. They didn't know I was in the apartment. Margaret was saying they needed to accelerate the timeline because you were becoming a problem. She suggested David get me pregnant to solidify the new family narrative for the court. My hand flew to my mouth. My God! He agreed, Jessica continued, her voice hollow. Just like that. Agreed to get me pregnant as a legal tactic. When I confronted him later, he tried to convince me it was because he wanted a family with me. But the way he'd discussed it with his mother, it was so cold, so calculated. I looked at the flash drive. And this contains evidence of all of this. She nodded. Everything, including discussions about how to undervalue the firm for the divorce proceedings. David has been hiding profits, Melissa. The firm is doing much better than he's reported. Why are you giving this to me? I had to ask. You could have just left him without getting involved in our divorce. Jessica met my eyes. Because what they're doing is wrong, and because I owe you an apology. I knew you didn't deserve what was happening, but I was too selfish and flattered by David's attention to care. I'm sorry. The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable. This young woman had been manipulated by the Sullivans just as I had been, though in a different way. What will you do now? I asked. Go back to Chicago, start over. She stood up, shouldering her bag. Use the flash drive however you need to. I've kept copies of everything in case they try to come after me. As she turned to leave, I called after her. Jessica, thank you. She gave me a sad smile. Don't thank me. Just make them pay for what they did to both of us. I called Rachel immediately after Jessica left, arranging to bring her the flash drive right away. As I waited for an Uber, I felt a strange mix of emotions, vindication that my instincts about Margaret's involvement had been correct, disgust at the calculated nature of their scheme, and an odd sense of relief. This hadn't been about my weight, my work hours, or any of my supposed failings as a wife. It had been a cold-blooded financial strategy from the beginning. Somehow, that made it easier to bear, and infinitely more satisfying to fight. The evidence on Jessica's flash drive was damning. Emails between David and Margaret discussing how to manage the narrative of the divorce. Financial records showing the true profitability of the firm. Text messages between David and his mother, strategizing about when to deploy the Jessica scenario. Most disturbing were the exchanges about me, discussing my work schedule. Noting when I seemed particularly stressed or vulnerable, debating the optimal timing for the divorce filing to minimize my resistance. Rachel was ecstatic. This changes everything, she declared, reviewing the documents in her office. They've committed fraud by hiding assets. The judge will eviscerate them. But I felt strangely calm. I don't want to destroy David's career, Rachel. I just want what's fair. She looked at me with newfound respect. That's remarkably generous, given what we now know. But you understand we can use this as significant leverage in settlement negotiations? I nodded. That's exactly what I want. Leverage for a fair settlement, not a scorched earth campaign. Within hours, Rachel had drafted a new settlement proposal and sent it to Greenberg, with a note explaining that we had come into possession of concerning documentation that might be of interest to the court if a reasonable settlement couldn't be reached. The response was nearly immediate, a request for an emergency meeting the following morning. This time David and Greenberg arrived without Margaret. David looked haggard, with dark circles under his eyes and his normally impeccable suit slightly rumpled. The cocky lawyer who had dismissed my contributions was nowhere to be seen. Greenberg spoke first. We've reviewed your latest proposal and are prepared to accept the majority of the terms, with some minor adjustments. Rachel raised an eyebrow. That's quite a change from your position earlier this week. New information has come to light that changes our assessment of the situation, Greenberg said carefully. I assume you're referring to the evidence of fraud and conspiracy, Rachel asked bluntly. David flinched but remained silent, letting his lawyer handle the discussion. We don't admit to any wrongdoing, Greenberg said smoothly, but my client is eager to resolve this matter amicably and move forward. The meeting progressed quickly after that. They agreed to a $400,000 payment for my contributions to the firm, more than we had initially requested. The $6,400 for Margaret's surgery would be paid in full within 30 days. The apartment would remain mine, as would all its contents, except for a few personal items David still wished to collect. As we were finalizing the details, David finally spoke directly to me. "Where's Jessica? Is she behind this?" I met his gaze steadily. "Jessica left you, David, just like you left me. Seems to be a pattern." His face darkened. "She had no right to..." "To what? Tell the truth?" I interrupted. "She had every right. Just as I had every right to fight for what I earned." "My mother was right about you," he muttered. "No, she wasn't," I replied calmly. "That's the tragedy here, David. I loved you. I would have done anything for you. For us. Your mother never saw that because she never wanted to. And eventually, neither did you." Something flashed in his eyes. Regret, perhaps, or simply the recognition of a truth he'd worked hard to deny. "Sign the papers, David," I said quietly. "Let's both move on." After they left, Rachel handed me a glass of scotch from the bottle she kept in her office for special occasions. "To justice," she toasted, "and to new beginnings." I clinked my glass against hers. "To knowing your worth, and never forgetting it again." 6 months later, I stood in my apartment, now truly mine in every sense, surveying the changes I'd made. Gone was David's dark, masculine furniture, replaced with pieces that reflected my own taste. The walls, once the conservative beige he'd insisted on, were now painted in soothing blues and greens. Photographs of my new life, hiking trips with Kate, dinners with friends I'd reconnected with, my graduation from the executive MBA program I'd finally had time to complete, adorned the shelves. My phone buzzed with a text from Kate. "Ready for our celebratory dinner? Big news to share." I smiled, typing back, "On my way. Can't wait to hear." As I grabbed my purse, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was different from the shell-shocked wife who had sat across from David at Mia's a year ago. I'd lost some of the weight, not because anyone else wanted me to, but because the stress of an unhappy marriage was no longer driving me to emotional eating. My hair was shorter, more modern, my posture straighter, but the biggest change was in my eyes. They held a confidence that had been missing for years, perhaps had never fully been there at all. The doorman smiled as I crossed the lobby. "Evening, Ms. Carter. Beautiful night." "It is indeed, Carlos," I agreed, stepping out into the spring evening. I'd kept my maiden name after the divorce, another small reclamation of self. The settlement money had been invested wisely, providing a cushion that allowed me to take risks in my career I'd never dared before. I'd recently been promoted to executive creative director at my firm, with a corner office and a team of my own. Kate was waiting at our favourite restaurant, practically bouncing with excitement. "So," I asked after ordering our drinks, "what's the big news?" She grinned and slid an envelope across the table. "Open it." Inside was a newspaper clipping, a small article from the legal section of the New York Times. "Sullivan Law Firm faces exodus after financial irregularities." The article detailed how several senior associates had left the firm following discoveries of accounting discrepancies and management concerns. David was quoted offering a bland statement about restructuring and moving forward. "Apparently," Kate said gleefully, "once people started looking closely at the firm's finances after your settlement, they found all sorts of problems. Rachel says 3 different associates have approached her about potential legal action." I set the clipping down, feeling a complex mix of emotions. I never wanted his firm to collapse. "It's not collapsing," Kate assured me. "Just experiencing the natural consequences of dishonesty. Besides, there's more." She leaned forward conspiratorially. "Margaret had to sell the Hamptons house to cover some of the firm's debts, and guess who bought it?" My eyes widened. "No." "Yes, Rachel Bennett herself. She's throwing a massive housewarming party next month, and you're invited. Apparently she's having the entire master bathroom remodelled, you know, the one Margaret was so proud of." I couldn't help laughing. The poetic justice was too perfect. "What about Jessica?" I asked. I'd thought about David's former assistant occasionally, wondering if she'd found her fresh start. According to Rachel's legal grapevine, she's working for a non-profit in Chicago and dating a doctor. Definitely traded up. Our drinks arrived and Kate raised her glass. To Karma. I clinked my glass against hers, but offered a different toast. To second chances, and to becoming the woman I was always meant to be. Later that night, as I walked back to my apartment through the vibrant city streets, I reflected on the journey of the past year. David's cruel words at Mia's had seemed like an ending, the devastating conclusion to the story I thought we were writing together. Instead, they had been a beginning, the start of a different story, my story, where I discovered my own strength, my own worth, my own voice. "You're fat. You're no longer the woman I married," he had said. He'd been right about one thing. I wasn't that woman anymore. I was something far better, a woman who knew her value and would never again let anyone convince her it was less than she deserved. And that, I realised as I looked up at the stars barely visible through the New York City lights, was the most beautiful transformation of all. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.